My daughter says, Mom, you don't realize how hard it is for all of us to see Dad like that.
My dreams are that he gets to make memories with us.
Frankly, she wasn't real happy when she was brought back to life and she knew that she was dying at that point.
I've kind of come to terms a little bit that, by God, I am mortal.
Honoring Choices at the End of Life is a co-production of the Twin Cities Medical Society, providing physician leadership for the health of our communities, and TPT's Minnesota Channel. Funding has been provided by these foundations and companies.
Fall of 2010, I was out with my daughters raking leaves, and I didn't have much energy at the time, and my lungs just turned into fire. Then later during that fall, I had all kinds of neurological problems, strange stuff with my feet and numbness in my legs. 65th birthday, February 17th, I'm driving here to a birthday party. People got coffee and cake for me. 10 minutes before I get here, the phone rings, cell phone, pick it up. The doctor says, well, we finally figured out what you got. One guy in the country who's an expert on this at Mayo in Scottsdale discovers that I have granular pulmonary lymphoma. There are only 500 to 600 people in the medical literature that have ever been reported having it. Prognosis is not good. That's all I know, so I go in and have a birthday party. Well, come to find out when I start reading the literature is that the average survival time after diagnosis, the median is 14 months.
We had a gentleman that had a big aneurysm in his head and actually needed to have it bypassed between one part of the vessel to the other. And the guy was confused and disoriented, somewhat delirious, otherwise medically stable, but still could not speak for himself. And he had no family. He had nobody that could speak for him. For several days in the hospital here, we were kind of struggling with, you discharge him, knowing that at some time that's going to rupture. You can't do surgery without permission, but you can't get permission without informed consent.
Most advanced care planning today is done at time of a crisis. When it's done, there hasn't been enough discussion beforehand. And so often family members state when they're faced in making a decision for their loved one, they said, we never talked about this. I have no idea what they would want. And so it puts quite a bit of burden on family members to make a decision that they're unsure. We've seen family members that are put in that position, and when they don't have those discussions long-term after someone has passed, it really affects how well that they deal with the loss of that person and the guilt that maybe they provided care that their loved one didn't want. So it has long-term effects.
And other times we might have a catastrophic event, a major stroke or a ruptured aneurysm, and there's no decision maker, or the family is polarized. So half the family feels that we need to do everything and we need to move to surgery and do everything to preserve life. The other family members feel that my mom or dad would not want any of this done and we should stop doing care. And both are right, depending upon the situation.
Up until now, because we don't know a person's wishes, when they come to the health system, we do everything. And then when people are stable and we can sit back and say, well, maybe now we should ask really truly, what do you want for your care? A lot of people get the care that they didn't want. They either get more care than they were thinking they wanted or less care. We are going to need to be more responsible as a consumer around understanding what options are out there for us.
This isn't a way to pull the plug. This is a way to honor the choice of the patient.
In the Middle Ages, people were used to death, completely different than now. Medicine wasn't available the same way, so people faced it in a much different way than we do now. I'm originally from Cuba, and I lived there until I was 18. At 18, I left. The United States became my home, and it's been a wonderful home for me. I had always enjoyed drawing and doing little paintings. It just blossomed beyond anything that I could possibly imagine. I knew that I had the beginning of emphysema in some fashion. Then when the head of transplant at the hospital comes into your room and says, you have no more than 2 months, your lungs don't exist, they're shot. You get the message instantly, there's no questions left. The next thing that happens is your wife starts crying, and you then try to console her. That consolation process then makes you realize, okay, this is who you care the most about. What can you do to make this transition easier for her and for the children and even for yourself? We have 4 children, so we brought all of them and discussed what we were all going to face. It was very difficult. No one is really prepared for it. There are families that are afraid of being too close to each other, and I've seen that. Gladys and I have been married for 45 years. That's a lifetime. And it's very difficult to live that. But I realize that it's just part of life. The same as birth, death is also as important, and it's going to happen no matter what. So we were very close as a family. A lot of crying, no doubt. There are times when it doesn't matter how tough you think you are, you're going to break down. There are subjects that we wish would never come, and yet we cannot help but face them. Each children, in essence, began discussing what was important to them and what they wanted to talk about. It became individual conversations, but all towards the same goal. That was about 2 years and 8 months. So it's been a long time, a long time. I've done a lot of things in that time. And my doctor said, I don't want to know about your illness and this or that. I just want to ask you this. Do you want to live or do you want to die? If you want to live, then I'm going to try to keep you alive as long as I can. You tell me the parameters.
None of us really want to talk about it. Most of us would like to live as long as possible if we've got good quality of life. But it's in the process of you're living with a chronic illness and your quality of life changes, you may not want as much treatment as you did before. And so it really requires an ongoing discussion. Up until now, it's been, I'm going to wait for the family to ask me about it. And the family says, I'm going to wait for my doctor to ask me about it. And then it never gets discussed until you're in the intensive care unit.
When I see people fighting and arguing, I think, why do that? You don't know what's going to happen in the end. And you don't want to have that kind of life that you're sorry you did this or you're sorry you did that. Steve is an inventor. He has 17 national and international patents. He was an electrical engineer in the medical field, mostly heart pacemakers and that type of thing. We always thought he was like an absent-minded professor, you know, just kind of forgetful about things. He would leave his car keys, he'd forget his glasses, he'd forget his billfold. He started making kind of bad decisions. Like one time he gave a man $5,000 to do the roof, and the man took off, of course. Then when he got quite forgetful, our son is the one that kind of noticed it more. And he said, you know, Dad is really not thinking clearly. He had a brain scan, and they said they thought it was the beginning of dementia, and that was about 10 years ago. I didn't know anything. I was going to a support group at the time, and I had a woman doctor that was specifically for dementia. And she said, well, sometimes it happens, they go downhill so fast that within a month, they're gone. The kids, I think, thought that Steve probably would have died last year. They didn't think he'd make it through Christmas. And then he kind of started improving.
Are any of these things that you and Steve had talked about before he got dementia?
Not really. No, we didn't. We didn't plan it at all. And I don't even think I'm very planned right now. We just know we're not going to have any extraordinary measures. They will always treat for pain. You know, I've been reading about death and dying because I really didn't know about it either. But I think when they stop eating is a sign And we're not going to force feed him, and we're not going to put a tube in. You know, when he stops eating, then he's done. And I know that's what he would have wanted too. Everybody just supported my decision. I just made it. I just made the decision. We're not having anything extraordinary. We're not having the stomach tube, and we're not doing that.
Why did you make that decision?
Because I think, why do that? We all have to die. And when it's time, I think it's time. I think death is a natural thing. We all are going to die. We don't know when. Could be a car accident. I mean, it could be any time.
If your mom or dad could wake up for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and be totally lucid and competent to make a decision, what would he or she say about this surgery? What would he or she say about this gastrostomy tube or this ventilator? If you had 15 minutes to talk to them, what would they say, as opposed to what do you think and the challenges that you have in making that decision? We see families that are unprepared all the time here. The families that are unprepared, haven't talked about it, haven't thought about it, all of a sudden a major catastrophic illness happens to the breadwinner of the family, puts them in crisis.
Tube feedings, dialysis, being on a ventilator, having your heart restarted. A lot of those treatments you can explore, and based upon your goals and values, let other people know whether you would want those treatments or you wouldn't want them, or I'd be willing to consider those treatments maybe for a short period of time.
It doesn't have to be a morbid conversation. I mean, that can be the parents talking to the kids about saying, if something were to happen to us, we want you, my oldest son or my daughter, or we've chosen our best friend to speak for us. And it should be a loving conversation.
A good work of art can.
I think that first month was talking to close friends. But what changed it out of nowhere was a year ago on March 18th, I walked in a class and a student said, well, have you seen it on the internet yet? I said, what are you talking about? She said, the Monty Butte Fan Club. And she said, oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to say. Well, it turns out former students and colleagues started a fan club. And it sort of outed me in an odd way. And that kind of changed the nature of this whole process. I think without that, this would have been probably a much more private experience. A friend of mine said, I don't know how you're dealing with this. He said, I would have just gone home, climbed into the covers, and pulled them over my head. And that might have been more my reaction. But suddenly it kind of hit me between the eyes. You're a teacher. This is a teachable moment.
When I look at what happens to families in the midst of a crisis, an advance directive actually is a very stabilizing document. An advance directive is a statement by the patient at a time that they can make that decision about the kind of care that they might or might not want should they become seriously ill.
A good advance directive will actually allow people to get the right type of care the first time rather than the second or third attempt.
Maybe even more importantly, it's about who can make the decision for them and who have they chosen to make a decision when they can't speak for themselves. When someone becomes incapacitated, then we can turn to that document and use it as a guide. An advance directive just kind of codifies that belief and value system that patient has. It's a chance for them to say, this is what I believe in, this is what I don't want, this is what I do want, this is the person that best speaks for me.
What's important to you? So what are your goals? What are your values? What is important to you from a religious or spiritual standpoint that helps you drive decisions in your everyday life and that might translate to how you might choose various medical care?
I dream that he will be able to sit up, that he'll be able to walk maybe one day, to talk. I mean, just simple things that we take for granted.
It's a little bit different with kids, children, because really the parental unit is the decision maker. There's a lot of extra feelings around this because people are young. We just assume naturally that we want them to live as long as possible.
There's so many different complications that can happen. I'd heard of Trisomy 18. At our church, there was a story, and we saw that baby's life, and that baby did not survive to be a year. It survived just a few months.
So, I mean, what did you think when you heard that that might be your child?
It was devastating. Okay, are we gonna have to start planning for a funeral, or are we gonna plan for our baby to live? Are we gonna keep him on life support? It's a chromosome defect, so in Nathaniel is trisomy 13. He's got an extra copy of chromosome number 13 on every one of his cells.
Did you think he was going to live?
I don't know what I thought. No, I was so mixed with emotion. I didn't think he was gonna live. I had a great fear. He looked so sick and he was so small. They told us that there's a really good chance that he's gonna pass away quite quickly. They didn't think that he would live longer than 2 weeks. He's gonna stop breathing and he's just not gonna come back.
My dreams are that he gets to make memories with us. That it's not, just the memories that we get to make with him, but, eventually he's going to get to that point in his life where he'll start remembering stuff too.
Nathaniel celebrated his 1-year birthday, and we printed out some pictures. And then we just printed on the back the survivability statistics for trisomy 13. Did you know a trisomy 13 baby has up to 60% chance of stillbirth, about 82% chance of not surviving his first 30 days, and about a 7% chance of making it to his first birthday? This is what we gave Nathaniel as his life verse, John 9:3. It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. He was born blind so the power of God could be seen in him.
My mom passed away 3 years ago. They did decide to pre-plan and prepay their funerals when they were probably in their late 70s, so they let us know that they had done that, which was a gift. We talked a little bit about wills. My mom had said, I'm going to put you in charge of deciding who gets what, and my brother was executor. We knew that, but nothing else, no other plans. But it's kind of a taboo subject. I don't think anyone wants to talk about it. You're exploring your own vulnerability and death. My parents had healthcare directives, and they were to not resuscitate. But frankly, when my mother was in a position where she had coded and they were determining whether they should try to bring her back, my father said, we want to do everything. And my brother said, we want to do everything. And no one had the directive in hand, so we didn't really adhere to her demands. And frankly, she wasn't real happy when she was brought back to life. And she was very much alive and talking and walking, but she knew that she was dying at that point. In retrospect, I wish I hadn't. It was the worst thing ever, just sitting around watching her die. Modern medicine has been wonderful and awful at the same time, that people are living longer and sicker and more compromised. And it used to be if you got cancer or something, you died. But now you could live for years and years. Is the quality of life there? Not necessarily. I've known people that go into hospice care who thrive and have to go off because Medicare's not going to cover it anymore because you're doing everything. Your prognosis has changed. I think it's wonderful that people are staying alive, but it's a catch-22. We are Jewish, and the Jewish way of dying is no different than anywhere else. Our burial is a little quicker, and we sit Shiva, like a period of mourning, and you're just surrounded by friends and family who take care of you and make sure you're fed and wait on you, and it's fabulous. And also if you're fairly observant, which I like to think I am, I go to the synagogue every single day and say a prayer for the dead in honor and in memory of my dad, and we do that for 11 months following a death. So for me, that's really comforting because it's at a synagogue where I was born and raised. I'm a third generation. And so every day I go, I see somebody different that knew my dad and will make a comment. Hindsight is always easier, isn't it? You know, people need to have those discussions. They certainly need to tell their kids where the will is and the titles to the cars and the house and the mortgage, because what a mess. You know, I look at the boxes I keep carting out of my mom and dad's, and I'm planning an estate sale and I've put the house on the market. It's a lot to do. And you need to start putting in writing things that you want to do before you have that conversation with kids. And I would say when I do it, I'm going to try and pair it with something pleasant. Like, maybe we're all getting dinner, we're going to go out to dinner. But by the way, you know, before we go, let's sit down and have this frank discussion.
Where's the responsibility? That's a great question. It probably lands on both the patient and the family to be thinking about it, having the conversation around the coffee table in the kitchen. So that's one half of the responsibility. And I think the other half is the doctor, the primary care doctor, to say, you know, you're getting to an age, you know, you should be thinking about an advance directive. Physicians are looking for an answer here, and they're not going to solve it in their clinic, especially towards the end of life. I mean, planning for that is as important as, I'd say, is getting your blood pressure checked and checking your cholesterol and checking for diabetes. This should be part of your checkup.
Most people think once I've filled out an advance directive, I'm done. And that's not true. You need to revisit your advanced care plan at least every 5 years.
How can I get some help? Who can help me write this? Because the doctor doesn't have time. You know, I make an appointment, I got 20 minutes, and it's not going to happen in the doctor's appointment. That, to me, is the value of, you know, the facilitated discussion, the trained facilitator coming in and having the conversation and bringing their experience of, you know, hundreds of other conversations to the table.
It's really twofold. It's that discussion and then getting it written down in some legal document. And an advance directive really can be a legal healthcare directive, or it could be a narrative that is considered legal by witnessing your signature. So it doesn't have to be an official document that you go to a lawyer to fill out. It could be a narrated document that we should honor and respect. There's a lot of talk about death panels and that I'm just signing a prescription on how to die, and really advanced care planning is the opposite. It gives a prescription to get care that you want, allowing your family members to advocate for you and actually take control back. We don't support people well when it gets close to the end of their life. 50% of people either die in a hospital or another 25% die in a nursing home. And when we take a poll from people that we ask them, if you knew you were critically ill or terminal, where is it that you would like to die? 80% say I'd like to die at home with family and friends. So we don't do a good job to understanding wishes and asking, if you did become so sick that it looked like you might not live very long, what type of care would you want and how can we help support you? We don't talk about that well enough.
I'm right now feeling better than I have in 15, 16 months. I'm in remission. The last time I was in remission, 3 months. I don't have great faith that this is going to last longer. To your other teachers. But it's such a roller coaster. Today I'm bursting with energy. In 2 months I could be on my back and barely able to get out of bed again. I can't say that I'm content with this dying, but on the other hand, I'm not going to rage against the dying of the light. Literally, I've gotten thousands of emails and stuff through all of this and Facebook things. But there's always this haunting, what I called it in there, and it disturbed a lot of people, was the coming darkness. Don't you know you're going into the light? Hell no, I don't know I'm going into the light. I'm making my terms with this on the understanding that I've had 66 years on this earth. And what a wonderful event. Out of millions of years of evolution, I got to have this moment in time on this earth. What more could someone ask for than this?
Honoring Choices at the End of Life is a co-production of the Twin Cities Medical Society, providing physician leadership for the health of our communities, and TPT's Minnesota channel. Funding has been provided by these foundations and companies.